Hello, and welcome to the Anti-Gravity Room. I'm one of your hosts, Sir Nicholas Amadeus Skula III, and today, for your viewing pleasure, we bring you Alan Moore and Art Spiegelman.
And I'm Jamie in LA. George Lucas and the Chemical Brothers will also be joining us. Jack Kerouac had to cancel, as he is dead.
It's a fact. Most people think Canada's national animal is the beaver. It's actually the sea cucumber. I'm Phil, standing in our glorious capital city of Canada, Ottawa. And in case you haven't figured it out, we're looking at some of the greatest stories ever told.
Art Spiegelman has done more for the medium of comic books than G. Gordon Liddy has done for the promotion of democracy. We caught up to him at the Comic Book Expo in New York. Check it out.
Mouse, by Art Spiegelman, is an autobiographical story exploring Spiegelman's relationship with his family and loved ones, and his family's struggle to survive during and after the rise of the Third Reich. Using different animals to represent humans, Spiegelman tells a dramatic, personal story.
One of the main things that happened as a result of the underground comics was the invention of the autobiographical mode. That this was actually a new thing in comics. It was actually, I think, really invented by a cartoonist named Justin Green, who was working in underground comics and did something called Binky Brown Meets the Holy Virgin Mary. Binky Brown was a cipher for Justin Green.
The everyday living conditions imposed on prisoners in concentration camps is shown in horrific simplicity. Mouse has an intense realism. Its depiction of Auschwitz is both moving and disturbing because it is a true story.
Then the only vision I had was a formal one, which is I wanted a comic book that you would need a bookmark for, so that it would be long enough for you not to be able to read at one pass of the toilet. And then I had a couple of notions, and one of them specifically was based on a short strip I had done in the early 70s, which was Mal's, and I realized this was terrain that was much more... In a way, it just seemed like the most complex thing I could take on, like it probably wasn't doable, and therefore it was interesting to try.
Mouse has won the Pulitzer Prize and is still considered the definitive graphic novel.
It's a fact. These very Parliament buildings burned down in 1906, all except for the library. But that's because we make our books out of rocks. That has nothing to do with comic books, but this does. Quies custodiet ipsos custodes. And if you don't know what that means, you need to listen to this man.
I'm here today with Alan Moore here at the Tower Bridge in London. How are you doing today, Alan?
I'm doing very well, Jackie.
Glad you could make the trip down from Northampton.
Yeah, I don't make it very often, but if there's a special reason to, I'll try and drag myself out of bed, you know.
One question that comes to mind, did you and Dave Gibbons have any idea the impact that The Watchmen was going to have?
About 3 issues in, yes. Not to start with. Originally, we planned to do just a very clever, exciting superhero book with a few neat twists. Round about the 3rd issue, something strange started to happen in the mix. You know, we started to notice that there were interesting layers of storytelling going on between what was happening in the captions, what was happening in the pictures, the dialogue, the little strip about the pirates that was embedded in the overall strip. There was a peculiar kind of interaction going on that I'd never actually seen in comics before. And when we realised we were doing it, we decided that that was what the comic was about.
With all the hoopla and excitement and enthusiasm that went down with that, like when you look back, is it something you're still proud of? Does it still hold up for you, The Watchmen?
Watchmen still holds up for me. I still think Watchmen was a great work. It's not without its flaws, no work is. The hoopla that surrounded it has rather blunted some of its appeal for me. To me, I'm often reminded of something that David Bowie said when he described himself as the face that had launched 1,000 pretensions. You know, and there's some truth about that regarding Watchmen. Watchmen did seem to open the doors for a lot of people who they'd grasped the surface of Watchmen. They'd grasped that it had got grittier violence, a more adult approach to sexuality. They probably couldn't grasp exactly how to do some of the clever semiotic stuff that we were doing, but they got the sex, the violence, the pretension, the references to popular song lyrics, things like that, which all made it very 80s and very modern. And I've seen a lot of retreads of that kind of comic sensibility since that to me have seemed depressing, pretentious, and yet I have to own up to a certain paternity there.
Right.
You know, the child is ugly, but it's probably mine. You know, and that has tended to blunt it a bit. I wouldn't like to say that Watchmen had a good effect upon comics. I think it was a good comic book, but I wouldn't like to say that it had necessarily a good effect upon comics. It might just have doomed us to 10 years of heavy-handed pretension.
Looking back on the Watchmen, Alan, is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
No, I think that I'm pretty happy with it as it was. I don't think there's anything I could have done differently. You know, it was perhaps not all of it was the book that people wanted to read, but all of it was the book that I wanted to write. What I was trying to do in Watchmen was to use a lot of comic book icons in the plot, in the characters, but to do something different with them. As such, I think it was perfectly successful at what it did. You know, it's yeah, I'm happy with it. I'll stand by Watchmen.
Okay, on this week's CD-ROM-a-thon, I'm checking out Sega's Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition for the Sega Saturn, and I'm going head-to-head with Sonic the Hedgehog. Hey, buddy. All right. I have to say I got a bit of an advantage because the head on Sonic is just too big for aerodynamics, so I'm probably going to get a little bit of an advantage. Okay, first off, the peripheral we're going to talk about. Now, that's fancy talk for the steering wheel. All right. For the Sega Saturn, we have the Arcade Racer. This is a great option for any kind of racing game because steering wheel, it has everything. 3 buttons here, 3 buttons here. You got your X, Y, Z and your ABC over here. You know, so you can accelerate, you can change your display, you can brake, you can shift gears with this little. This is a great invention here. Little gear shift underneath, right? You can tilt. Woohoo! Very cool. Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition. Much more improved over the old Daytona USA. Lots of options with tracks. Lots of options with cars. You can choose different cars for different tracks. Good crashes, too. That's another thing. Watch this. I'm going to set it up. Crash! All gone. There you go. Huge crash. All right. So, speed around the track. So the game, much more improved over the old Daytona USA. I'm loving it. And I have to say, though, the game is only 100% if you have the Arcade Racer. I have to say. That's the one thing I have to say. So, 5 out of 5, you know, G's on the anti-gravity scale for the steering wheel, Sega Arcade Racer. And I have to give it 5 out of 5, the game. Really. Daytona USA. It's a killer game, isn't it? I enjoy this game.
Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns is one of the truly great moments in comics. Maximum Clonage is a close second.
Okay, roll surveillance footage. I got started in comics back at a time where it was a little easier to break in because almost nobody wanted to do it. I bounced around the companies. I hung out in lobbies and bugged people as they came in and out of work.
I was all set to do crime comics. I came in there with a bunch of samples of these tough guys in trench coats and found out that they didn't do anything with guys in tights. So I had to adjust and ended up grabbing those characters when I got the opportunity that were the least super heroic of the superheroes, like Daredevil and Batman. For me, doing Dark Knight was me just thoroughly exploiting and enjoying my childhood and bringing something of my own to it, because I thought, what if Batman were as old as his legend is? And also, what would really be the psychology of a guy who dressed up like a bat and threw criminals out windows? Would this man really be a liberal? Or wouldn't he be a somewhat strange human being? If you really go back and read Dark Knight, it's actually, I think, a fairly funny book in a lot of places. And it is anything but depressing.
This just in. Stoken, Shoot the Girl, ride the cosmic pipeline through the awesome Tube Ride. Silver Surfer animated series coming soon. Legend in the comic world, R. Crumb will be joining Peter Bagg on issue number 27 of Hate in a comic store near you. What? Me worry? Mad Magazine relaunches with a new look, a new feel, and a whole new gang of idiots.
It's a fact. The CIA was formed on Canadian soil. During World War II, the Americans came up to Canada for training and went on to form the OSS. They stopped wearing the red coats and riding the horses when they went back home, though.
Hey Crashers, I'm Nick here in Chairland, and this is Comicopia, my weekly chance to vent. First up this week, I'm revisiting a comic because it's just so cool. House of Secrets, number 5.
This is an awesome book about a woman's journey of self-exploration. In this issue, our main character wakes up in a daze, feeling the guilt of her past. She is drawn to her childhood house, where we learn the secrets of her troubled family. The writing in this comic is superb. It is a great portrayal of what a woman who has been through so much trauma would say, and it's done in a very Vertigo style. The art is also very cool. The panels are drawn in wide shots that give a distant feel to the book.
House of Secrets is one of the best titles of the year so far, and I give it 4 out of 5 Gs on the anti-gravity scale. Next up, the return of a major comic book team, Justice League of America, number 4.
In this book, we find the newly updated JLA imprisoned by a strange race of beings. An all-out battle begins when Superman figures out that they are, in fact, aliens out to take over the world. Don't you love those classic storylines? The tale ends with the JLA once again saving the world. The art for this book is just great. It has a very 90s feel to it. It's cool to see a JLA book done in a contemporary form. The writing is really fun also. You have the classic stories with the updated material. You can't lose.
This is a cool trip back to the past, and I give it 3.5 out of 5 Gs on the anti-gravity scale. Next, the most earth-shaking, groundbreaking, influential journey of a comic, Pep, number 151.
This issue follows Archie's wacky mishaps with his dreams of being a sorcerer. It also has extra cool fashion adventures with Betty and Veronica. This installment in this crazy series also includes a bonus Lil Jinx comic, where Jinx runs into a bully. Go on, you cutie. The art and writing on this book is some of the best that Archie Comics ever did. It's too cool.
These comics are classic, and I highly suggest you pick one up. I give this 3 out of 5 Gs on the anti-gravity scale. Well, that's it from Chair World. See you next time.
And now one of the all-time classics. A story so remarkable it has affected the world in ways we cannot yet imagine. A tale that is burned upon our hearts and our memories. Star Wars.
I think a lot of the themes are very old themes that have been around for a long time, and I think that definitely has an effect on people's enjoyment, because a lot of the mythological themes were verbal and passed on from one generation to another, so that they were played before an audience for a long time. I think that helps. Ultimately, people gravitate towards story and characters. Those are the things that really last.
That deals in all those primal fairy tale archetypes. A pirate, a princess, a farm boy, a wizard, and a couple of laughable robots. I mean, what's not to like?
Beyond all the technical improvements, Star Wars is still the story of Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2 as good battles evil in the universe.
This will be a day long remembered.
I think it's just a great story, and it has characters that become, global icons, and even, between re-releases of Star Wars, people are always referring to the Force being with us, and it's part of the American vernacular at this point in time. It's part of our culture.
Well, now the Anti-Gravity Room delves into the great unknown of the great stories. These tales that are out of the mainstream but are still equally as important. No, I'm not talking about Zeus and Roxanne. I'm talking about Love and Rockets with Jaime and Gilbert Hernandez.
Hi, I'm here with the brothers that created Love and Rockets. Guys, introduce yourselves.
I'm Gilbert Hernandez.
And I'm Jaime Hernandez.
Love and Rockets ended about a year ago. In hindsight, please tell us about the story and the characters in Love and Rockets.
Love and Rockets was a comic book that we started 15 years ago. A comic book about things we wanted to see in comics that we didn't see in comics.
Love and Rockets always emphasized women characters, mostly Hispanic, and other minorities, because we just simply didn't see that in most popular entertainment. And we knew there was a lot of stories there to tell. That was a way of us being original as well. We got really good critical response, a lot of attention. We got a lot of good press because of the characterization. Love and Rocket's greatest strength was its characterization, and particularly of the women characters. We also influenced a lot of younger cartoonists, and not in the sense of the actual stories, but just that we were able to do what we wanted to do, as opposed to what you have to to do for the larger mainstream companies. We just felt like doing what pleased us, and what amused us. Like for example, like putting in, emphasizing rock and roll into the comic.
My work was pretty much based on a music scene that I went through when I was a teenager, the whole LA punk scene that I always thought would look good in a comic book, so that's why I did it.
Since Jaime was already emphasizing that in his work, I decided to go a different route by dealing with Hispanics living in a completely different culture, but now and again being affected by the strangeness of rock and roll, at least the strangeness that it was to them.
Where did you get your inspiration for the female characters?
Maggie and Hopi, my two main characters, pretty much come from that music scene, the punk scene that I grew up with. Some characters are based on like 100 different people. Some are based on like someone I see walking down the street. I like that hairstyle.
Who's Maggie based on? Jaime says 100 different people, including you. And at the same time, they're flattered, but then they get kind of bummed out because they want to find that person. They want that to be a person, and they actually are. But she's everybody.
Well, a lot of her is me. So this is what you get.
What's it like working with new characters after working with the old ones for so long?
New character is always like an open book. You never know where they're going or where they came from, and the more you do stories about them, the more you learn.
Will the two of you ever publish together again?
Right now, I've barely gotten used to doing it alone. Maybe I'll get tired of it or not feel confident enough to do it myself and say, Gilbert, will you do a